Hello, BookTube. I thought we'd do a very quick little mail haul here, just to keep my hand in. A couple of packages that were not opened off camera. That on a very lovely day, the massive heat dome that was over New England for a whole month definitely moved out. We've had seasonable weather. A couple of very early mornings have been very cool. But today, there's been a change. Today, the humidity has been going up and up and up and up. Not the temperature, but the humidity is unbearable outside. I'm assuming because all of that is being pushed ahead of a storm system and that it will break. I doubt that it can sustain itself this way. Mighty sticky outside. But otherwise lovely. Lovely not to have to view the weather outside as some sort of gnarly crouched predator. That's nice. So we just got a couple of packages here. Let's see what we have. Maybe it'll be of interest. Maybe more interest to you than to me. Let's see here. Okay, this first one is a paperback mystery novel. Got a little chewed up in the process here. This is from the folks at Minotaur Books. That's great. This comes out in November. So that's a good long time from now. This is by Deborah Benoit, and it is The Gardener's Plot. It's got a cartoon cover, but I like the play on words for the title. Let's see here. Oh, this is a debut. Oh, fantastic. All right, let's see here. Maggie Walker, master gardener, moves back to the small Berkshire town Marlow, where after her grandmother's passing. Her grandmother is not passing. She's not Eskimo trying to be white. She's died. She's dead. After her grandmother's death. Her passion for gardening leads her to helping Violet Bloom open a community garden. However, on opening... Lucky thing she didn't want to open a bordello. Who knows what her surname would be. However, on opening day, a boot is discovered in one of the plots with a body attached. A delightful read. Well, slow down there, Seymour. I'll quite literally be the judge of that. This book delivers a small-town whodunit full of gossip and friendship with a charming amateur sleuth who gets in the way of the broody homicide detective more often than he would like. It has the hallmarks of the perfect cozy mystery, a quirky supporting cast, light tones, and an intriguing puzzle. And one of the main characters' names in a book called The Gardener's Plot, who's trying to open a community garden, her name is Bloom. Almost torpedoes the book, but not quite. Not quite. So this comes out in early November, and I'm assuming this is going to be a paperback original. Am I right about that? Are you going to give me any information? No, this is going to be a hardcover. It's going to be a $28 hardcover. And what do we know about the author? Deborah Benoit was a legal secretary for 30 years before deciding to pursue more creative endeavors. And this is her debut novel. How incredible. And she was born and raised in the Berkshires, which are, those of you who maybe don't know your American geography, they're in Massachusetts. They're here in Massachusetts. They are the summer home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra in Tanglewood. And there's no place she'd rather call home, even in winter. Okay, all right. The Berkshires had 2 cold days last winter. They're not going to have any cold days this coming winter. It's not going to snow anywhere in the Berkshires below 12,000 feet. It's not going to snow in the towns at all in the Berkshires this winter. And it's not going to be cold at all. By cold, meaning that you're in danger of frostbite if you're outside for half an hour. That's not going to happen this winter. Not in the Berkshires, not in Boston, not anywhere in New England. Determined never to stop learning, she loves sharing her knowledge of gardening through articles she's written in person or on social media. When not digging up plots in her garden, she can be found working on her latest fiber arts project. Good Lord, busy lady. But she has a debut novel. That is incredible. That's fantastic. Great. All right, so we're off to a fine start. I love debut fiction anyway. Then we'll move on to this next one. It's bigger than the last package, but it's a third the weight. So it's probably something tiny in here. So let's see what we have here. It's not coming willingly, but let's see what we have here. Oh, okay, great. It's a Penguin Classic. I love getting Penguin Classics in the mail. Let's see here. So what have we got here? This is the latest Penguin Classic. Also a little dinged up in the getting to me, but that's all right. let's see here. Okay, this is In This Sign by Joanne Greenberg, the new Penguin Classic. I don't have a sheet for this, so we'll just read off the back cover. This is you won't know this author's name, but you might know her most famous book, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. This is not that book, but it is another book. Abel and Janice meet at a school for the deaf. Sign language brings them together, enabling them to survive and indeed to forge a love too powerful to be broken into by a world into which they were born. Spanning 40 years from the late 1920s to the early 1960s, this book follows the lives of Abel, Janice, and their hearing daughter Margaret as they contend uneasily with the outside, a world designed, often purposely, to be inhospitable to those like them. Okay, all right. Well, it's just the back cover of the book. No aspect, and I mean no, I mean zero, no aspect of the outside world is purposely designed to be inhospitable to deaf people. Inadvertently, thoughtlessly designed, sure. Purposely, no. The world, quite literally, is not out to get you. First published in 1970, only a decade after American Sign Language's formal recognition as a language, and well before the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, this novel stands out as a rare, compassionate portrait of the deaf community. Okay, so In This Sign, there's an introduction by Sarah Novich and an afterword by the author, who of course is not only alive, but not even, I would bet, old. Which is, this book raises questions that are perfectly natural. Most people, when they think of Penguin Classics, think of the classics part, not the Penguin part. They think about reprinting canonical classics. This is in no way a canonical classic. The ink is still dry, is still wet on this book. It is in no way a canonical classic. It might be possible, maybe, to make an argument that this author's other book, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, is a classic. This, though, classic isn't a book that you think is worthy. It has nothing to do with what you think. It's all the elements that we use to judge a book, plus the z-axis of time, which you can't control. You can't dictate that. You can't say, this is going to be a classic. Time will dictate that. Plenty of things that you or I are sure will become classics are going to be forgotten. And sometimes the very least likely stuff, the stuff that we're sure will not be remembered, is remembered, and therefore has an element of being a classic. That you might not like that, but that's the way it is. You don't get to declare that's not true. There is no way to know if this book is a classic at all. Which, on the one hand, you want to say, well, good for Penguin Classics, their editorial board, for being more adventurous, and I agree with that. On the other hand, you want to say, well, okay, then you're just another publisher. You're just another reprint house. You're the New York Review of Books Classics. You're the NYRB Classics. You're not the Penguin Classics anymore because this isn't your remit. This author's still alive and kicking. There's no way to call this a classic, so you are just another reprint house. And I don't know where I stand on that. Where do you stand on that? What do you think of that? Pick a contemporary book that you really like. It can be anything, really. A lot of you, a depressing number of you, probably would suggest Kurt Vonnegut. But what if we were to say City on Fire by Garth Risk-Hallberg? Now, that was a big book. It was critically appraised. It was popular. It sold well. I would guess the author is very young, but the author is also working hard to give himself lung cancer. So I would argue that it's probably the best thing he's ever going to write. It is in no way a classic. You can't possibly say that. But you might have read it and liked it. I read it and liked it. How would you feel if Penguin picked it? I mean, it's an honor, certainly, to be in the Penguin Classic line, but isn't there a part of you that would say, well, yeah, it's an honor, and I'm glad it'll spread it to a wider audience, but it shouldn't be a Penguin Classic. Much as I love it, it shouldn't be. How would you feel about that? I don't know quite how to feel about this, but I don't know that I've ever read In This Sign. I'm trying to remember if it ever had a cheesy mass market paperback. That would have been the way I would have read it. And I can't remember if I ever did. So it will be a reading experience anyway for me. That's great. That's fantastic. It's just, It's just, is it the adventurousness of the current Penguin Classic selection board? Or is it that in the broader sense, at the 30,000 foot view, Penguin Classics is now just the name for another reprint house, just any other reprint house? And that they aren't reprinting things that belong on the same shelf with Jonathan Swift and the Bronte sisters. Those kind of classics, the kind of thing that they built their name on. If that's no longer a yardstick, well, then how do you feel about that? I'd love to know. Because there's no way construable that In This Sign by Joanna Greenberg is a classic. That is not construable in any way. You don't get to say that it is. It has to become one. And it can't do that so soon. So I don't know exactly, obviously I don't know exactly what I think about it, but it's going to be fun to read it. Or maybe reread it. I'll know in a few chapters if I've already read it. And then we have a debut. So we've got two very different kinds of fiction here. And that is our very soupy, humid Friday mail haul. Just a tiny little thing. With, of course, a nosy question for you. So feel free to bombard me in the comments or to send emails. I'd love to know what you think when not just Penguin, but anybody, Oxford World Classics or Dover or even the NYRB Classics, what do you feel when they pick something that feels so contemporary? Part of you, I'm sure, if it's a book that you like, I mean, if Penguin Classics did a Penguin Classic of Paris Trout by Pete Dexter, part of me would be doing Handsprings. But I know that another part of me would be saying, as great as it is to see, I don't want it. I don't want to see it. You can't say that it's a classic. You don't get to determine that. Based on the weight of your imprimatur, based on the weight of your back catalog. I don't know. I'll think about it. It's good to think about it. So anyway, I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.